Hi everybody, Mr. G here. Today we're going to talk about an introduction to Python via the idea of types, which we can assign to variables. To do this, we're going to use this repository I've created called Python Types and Variables. If you'd like to follow along, the link to this repository will be in the description, and you can click the Use This Template button and name your own repository, and it'll copy all of these files into it for you to also be able to work with. So if you're going to follow along, you can do that. And once you have, you can go in here, copy our code links so that we can go into Visual Studio and get it all set up. So it's going to copy it. That's looking good. So now over here, I'm going to go to Open Folder, and I'm going to go to this PC, Local Disk Users, and over here, Python Types and Variables, click Add. Everything here shows up on the left side, which is super convenient. So in here, first of all, we can start with the README, which is just a bunch of text, and it looks like it's meant to be formatted with some kind of coloring here. And this is one of the cool things about Markdown, is that it's going to make some nice looking files, but when you're just looking at the source, it doesn't quite look as nice. So if we either right-click on the tab up here or right-click on the file, we can do Open Preview, and it opens up the formatted version or a preview of the formatted version for you to look at. So this is something that you can do when you're looking through these Markdown files to help get a better sense of what's going on. So in this repository, there's going to be two types of files for most of the content. A Markdown file like this one that has notes. It might have a couple of code samples in there talking about how they work. And there's also a Python file to go with it, which has all those same code samples ready for you to run and modify and play with as you might want. In terms of what we're going to go over, we're going to talk about basic types in this video. And then in the next ones, we're going to talk about number operations, Boolean operations, and string operations. And you'll understand what those mean as we go through. There's also some opportunity for practice here via classwork and homework. So classwork.py has a bunch of comments asking you to do certain things. And to help check your work, there's a classwork.txt file that has what the output should look like if you were to do this assignment correctly. And if you're really stuck, I even provide a fully completed solution. So you can go and check there if you're really not sure how to do something. There's also a homework file that I don't provide solutions to, but is more practice for you to be able to get more familiar with these tools as we go. So let's get started. Let's go into basic types. And when I click this Markdown file, you actually see it changes the preview. So we can go here, see this nice new preview of it. So in any programming language, a type is a property that we assign to values that the program's going to use, and that property describes the rules that the value has to follow, which operations can be performed on it. So having two numbers added together is very different from putting two letters added together. Some programming languages might not have a rule for how to add two letters together. Python, in fact, has a lot of tools like that already built in, but the way the operation behaves is different based on what you are using to do the operation with. So the four basic types we're going to talk about here are integers, floats, booleans, and strings. And the nice thing about Python is that it automatically assigns a type to a variable when you create it based on the value you're assigning to it. So it'll look at what the value you're assigning and say, oh, 3 for the value for variable a. 3 is a whole number. That's just going to be an integer, or abbreviated to an int. Then it looks at b, and it says b is 2.1. Now 2.1 is not a whole number, so integer doesn't make sense. But we have this concept of a float. For those that aren't familiar, a float is a floating point number. So it's a way that we use computers to store decimals. It's one of the very popular ways. So we abbreviate it to float. So it views 2.1. It says, oh, it's a decimal. We need to store it as a floating point number so we can keep track of the decimal place. Down here we have c equals true, and you can see that true is a different color, and it's a capital T. True is a keyword. True and false are keywords. They represent the two Boolean values, on or off, true or false. So you can set a Boolean value, which is shortened to a bool. So C in this case would be a bool. And then D here has hello in quotes. And when you put something in either single or double quotes, it's considered a string, which is abbreviated to str. So this is the way we might get text incorporated into our program. So we're just going to do a quick highlight here. The operations we're going to talk about today, with numbers, both integers and floats, we could do addition, subtraction, multiplication. We have two different types of division, one to get a decimal answer, one to get a whole integer answer. We have modulus or remainder, which is when you do division, what do you have left over? And then we have exponentiation, which is raising a number to a power. These are some of our basic ones. In Booleans, we have the idea of integer casting, so we could turn a Boolean value into an integer with the rule that false is always worth 0 and true is always worth 1. We have a not value, which is the opposite, so not true would be false. We have and, which is a logical operator that is described as true if and only if both inputs are true, and otherwise in all other cases it's false. And we have or, which is similar but a little bit different, where it's false if and only if both inputs are false. Otherwise, it's always true. So even if just one input is true, it'll be true. And then taking a quick look at strings, we can build them with either single or double quotes. And if you want to do them on multiple lines, so if you have just a lot of text, you want to have some lines in there, you can use multi-line strings, which is using 3 of whichever you choose. So if it's single quotes, you do 3 single quotes, your message, and then 3 single quotes, or you could do it with 3 double quotes as well. We have a operation called length, which tells us the number of characters in a string. It counts all the characters. And indexing, which allows us to look at the different positions in a string and pull out individual characters at a time. So it looks at the position for the number provided, and the numbering starts at 0, which is something we're going to talk more about later. And then we also have slicing, which has a few different forms, and it allows us to take a chunk of the string rather than just one character at a time like indexing. So again, the next videos are going to start jumping into these operations, and we're going to start with number operations.